Chris from Average Eskate Reviews here, and I forgot the name of the channel. Is that definitely the right one? Average Eskate Reviews? We're back, and to kick off us coming back with reviews and videos is taking a look at essentially what was the foundation of this channel, which was video comparisons of boards. So today we're going to be looking at the infamous Evolve GTR Bamboo, and we're going to be VSing it against the brand new Hadean board, which I may refer to as Hadean many times in the video. Just deal with it if I do. Both these boards are obviously going to be the Bamboo editions that you can see behind me, and they're both going to be sitting on 7-inch wheels. So bear that in mind. So everything that we talk about in this review is going to be about Bamboo boards sat on 7-inch wheels using 66 tooth gears. Let's jump into it. Now, of course, a lot of you are probably surprised to see us with an Evolve board, but at the end of the day, it's a video that's been requested since we said that we were coming back. So we thought we'd do what we can to get our hands on one to be able to give you this video. Of course, we know that at the price point that this board is priced at, there are other boards out there that have been released over the course of the last few months or the last year that would be very good to VS against this board. But for the purposes of this video, bear in mind that we're looking at GTR Bamboo against Bamboo Hadean, so keep that in mind. Now, as always, when we get into a video like this, I'm going to be splitting it down into categories. The first one that I'm going to be kicking it off with is going to be the speed, because as you guys know, we're a little bit of speed freaks over here. We want the boards to be able to be enjoyable, exhilarating, exciting, so speed's a big factor for me. Now, with the original GTR Bamboo sat on 7-inch wheels, the top speed that you could get out of that board was 22 miles an hour. At the time, it seemed like it was quite adequate. Of course, a bit faster would be nice, but today, that's definitely not anywhere near what I would want my board to be able to do. And the most annoying thing about the original Bamboo GTR was that when you hit 22 miles an hour, that would be for maybe 5% of the board's battery. The second you got to 95%, you're at 21 or 20 miles an hour. 80%, maybe 19 to 20 miles an hour, and the battery just continued to decline. The board's performance declined even quicker. Now, with the Hadean board, it's refreshing to see that the top speed is much higher with 7-inch wheels on 66 tooth gear setup. 27 miles an hour is what's advertised, and I can confirm that you can hit 27 miles an hour very comfortably on this board. Even with a slight incline, if you're on completely flat terrain, it's even better, but it will definitely do 27 miles an hour, bearing in mind that I'm about 67, 68 kilograms. I've put on a bit of weight since the last videos, and that's including having a bag on my back or not, but the board is more than capable of hitting 27. On numerous occasions, I've even been able to get it to 28. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's where I want to be sat at. I know from what this board is spec'd out to have inside it in terms of the motors and the battery, it can definitely hit more than 27 miles an hour, but it's been limited from a safety perspective, which I guess makes sense, because when you're manufacturing boards in mass, you don't want people being able to do 30, 35 miles an hour on a skateboard and getting hurt, especially if they're not very experienced riders. So I understand why it's got a limiter on it. But as always, you guys know, 7-inch wheels, Bamboo deck, I want the board to be able to hit 30. 30 would be the golden number. But one thing I do have to say is, the more I've been riding and the older I'm getting, when I do come off a board, it takes me a little bit longer to heal than I used to back in the day. So this means that going faster isn't something that I always want to do. I don't want to cruise at 30 miles an hour anymore. I'm quite happy sat between sort of 25 and 28. But there is occasions when I'm riding with Ricky, who's on a DIY board, it would be nice to be able to hit 30, 31, just for quick bursts if I'm trying to keep up with someone or get around a car. So it's a little bit of a bummer that this board doesn't hit 30 miles an hour, but 27, when you think about it from a mass production perspective and the typical person that's going to be buying one of these boards and riding it, it's more than adequate, especially because double kingpin trucks, you don't really want to be going more than 30. And as a really big improvement from the GTR versus the Hadean board, with the Hadean, you'll be able to hit the top speed well past 40%, even 38% of the board's battery. I was still able to go between 25 and 26, sometimes hitting 27 miles an hour, versus the previous generation of boards, which this would just not be possible. So that's a very, very big advantage. Now from there, jumping onto the subject of range, next category, which makes sense when you've come off speed. Now with the original GTR Bamboo with 7-inch wheels, I think my top range was about 16 miles of what I call rideable range, before the board kicks you into a slow mode and starts riding to a point that's just not really fun. If you were riding conservatively, you might be able to get close to 18 or 19 miles in range on the GTR Bamboo. But with the Hadean board, I'm sat between 18 to 21 miles of range. Now, bearing in mind, we live in Cambridgeshire, we ride around London as well, which are predominantly flat areas. There's the occasion that we might hit a hill or like a bridge and we have to go up, but there's not really any hills or mountains that we're trying to climb. So with a Hadean board, my top range or my average range is between 18 to 21 miles, but that's riding quite aggressively, that's carving, doing a bit of slides on grass, you know, maybe hitting the occasional hill, doing a couple of 180s, but predominantly that's just kind of like going flat out, a smooth strip of road that we might have around Cambridge, just absolutely caning it. Any opportunity I have to go the top speed of the board, I definitely am doing that. This isn't your kind of like leisurely stroll where I'm kind of like just barely throttling the accelerator while kind of coasting. This is riding pretty hard. So 18 to 21 miles is where I'm set at, bearing in mind where we ride, the weather conditions, your body size or weight, all of these things, and of course the terrain you ride on. All of these factors will affect your range. It can be very contrasting depending on your size, your build, the weather, where you ride, how warm it is, how cold it is. All of this will affect it. But bearing in mind, we're testing the board in the month of April in the UK. So hopefully that gives you all the information that you need to know about what kind of range I'm getting on the brand new Hadean board. Now, next category is going to be the ride. Now, I think that's the biggest thing. When we look at the actual dimensions of the original GTR Bamboo versus the Hadean, the Bamboo GTR was actually a little bit shorter and not as wide. The new deck on the Hadean board, or the Hadean board, is not only longer and slightly wider, it's also a completely different shape, and it has a completely different concave. The original GTR had more of a U-shaped concave, whereas the Hadean has kind of like a W concave with a drop down as well. But it's not as aggressive a drop down as some of the other boards that I've ridden, or for example, even like the GTR Carbon. It's not as aggressive as that. It's probably, for me, being honest, the ideal deck shape and also drop down. It's not so aggressive that you feel like you have a step in front of your foot when you're riding forward, and if you need to run off the board, that step or that drop down is kind of going to catch your foot. It's quite gradual, and it feels good enough to lock you into the board so you can carve hard and you have really good control off-road, on grass, going over hills and slopes, but not so much so you feel like you're really locked into the board when you're just cruising around the streets. So I'm a big fan of the new shape and size. It's essentially everything that I wanted from the Bamboo GTR. If you remember some of the videos I shot previously, I said that I'd love that board if it was just a little bit longer, a little bit wider. And obviously after having ridden things like the own board, which had a drop down, and of course the M5, RIP, I got used to riding a drop down deck, and it's just nice to see that that's been adapted in the new deck shape. So the deck shape for me is a big hit. Now, because of the new deck, the ride of the Hadean board is definitely better than the GTR. What I mean by that is because it's a bigger deck, you have more control and more contact with the board to be able to control it better. But in addition to this, you just have a better foot placement on the board or the deck. So it just makes you feel a lot more comfortable, a lot more secure. And it also helps when you're going on a board that was maxed out at 22 miles an hour and now can do 27, 28 miles an hour. You definitely want that wider stance. You want that better board contact for enhanced control. All of that definitely stands out when you go from riding the Bamboo GTR over to the Hadean. So riding it on the streets, carving deep, long carves, or even short, choppy carves, or just riding full speed on a straight stretch and just giving the board everything that it's got, or even coming off-road and having a bit of fun doing some slides, the new deck, the new ride, definitely is an improvement from what I saw previously. So if you're wondering if the Hadean Bamboo is worth the upgrade, if you've got the GTR Bamboo, if you're looking at those two specific boards, you want to stay with Evolve and you just want something better, more powerful, more exhilarating, better control, better ride, better range, more speed, it's definitely going to be a simple answer of yes. 100% the Hadean is much better than the GTR Bamboo. Now, when we look at the battery, in the GTR Bamboo, that had a 10S4P battery, which, again, you know, the range wasn't ideal if you're wanting to spend an entire day riding around London. I'm not saying that the new board is giving you masses more range. We've gone from 16 miles of rideable range to somewhere between 18 to 21 miles of rideable range, which is still an improvement. But the new board, the Hadean in this case, features a 12S4P battery, which definitely does give you a little bit more range, a little bit more power, especially with the upgraded motors. If you look at a shot of the motors side by side, there's a big difference. Those tiny, tiny little motors on the GTR are now gone. The Hadean has much bigger, much more powerful motors, which you do feel, and the bigger battery is definitely a big plus. Battery, the bigger range, the better acceleration, the bigger top speed, all of that is definitely a big, big plus. The acceleration from the GTR versus the new Hadean board is definitely something that you feel. The first time I got on the Hadean, it felt a little bit twitchy when I put it into the now GTR mode doesn't exist. It's called Corsa mode. You definitely did feel like the board is quite twitchy. You had to lean forward before you hit that accelerator. The enhanced acceleration is definitely something that you do notice with that bigger battery, those bigger motors. Definitely a nice touch. It's something that you do adjust to. The twitchiness kind of goes away after a while when you've been riding other boards that have a more gradual curve as you floor it, whereas this one's quite aggressive, hence the name Corsa, but it is something that you adjust to quite quickly. Okay, now from there, the next point is going to be the remote. When we look at the GTR remote versus the Hadean remote, they're essentially the same shape, but the first thing you notice when you pick up the Hadean remote is that it's much heavier. The construction of the remote now features metal as opposed to it just being made from plastic and rubber, which has added a lot of durability to this remote. I've mentioned it on numerous occasions that the style of the Evolve remote I loved, but the flimsiness of it I hated. I can't tell you how many Evolve remotes I went through in the past 2 years. A lot of people had issues, some people didn't have issues with the remotes. this. I've dropped it from knee height, waist height, and it's completely shattered and broken. The screen's just been a splodge of ink, and I've not been able to ride my board as a result of this. This actually happened in Spain, the last few minutes that we were filming, if you remember me mentioning that in a previous video. Thank God it happened at the end of the shoot rather than at the beginning, or the whole trip would have been a disaster. But the new remote, I can definitely say that it's a big improvement. Aside from it not breaking anywhere near as easily, I've not been able to break it. You'll see a clip rolling through that will play just after this of me throwing the remote up in the air, slamming it on the ground, and doing the same thing to the old one to show you the difference between durability and what you can expect if you were to pick up this board with the brand new remote. Working just fine. No cracked screen, nothing. Let's see what happens when I do the same thing. Scratches on it. I mean, that was quite a hard drop. The screen's fine, look at that. Holy crap. The screen is completely fine. Everything seems to be working, nothing's popped out. The body hasn't separated like the other one. Let's see if the board still works in the distance. Yep, board still works just fine. Let me try another one, a bit higher. Break. Yup, the screen's still on. Look at that, dude. No way. It's got some scratches there, but it's fine. No buttons have popped out. The body's completely intact. Let's see if the board connects. Yup. Acceleration, brakes working fine. I'll try going to the settings. Yeah, everything's working completely fine. Look at that. Settings works, you can scroll up and down. No problems. Impressed. Much better remote. But in addition to the remote feeling heavier, beefier, more solid, and actually being more solid, the actual functionality of the remote is much, much more enhanced than what we saw previously. With the Hadean board, the new remote allows you to have an odometer built in, so you can see the total distance that you've ridden on the board, as well as different trips being broken down on the odometer as well. So you can go into the settings and see what your last ride was like, or your last, like a few rides. It logs your top speed, your average speed, the distance that you covered, like everything that you would expect to see in a standalone app that you'd have to get in addition to the board, which was what we had to do previously. All of that is now built into the board's functionality and the remote. Now, also in addition to this, the remote allows you to customize the different lights, which is a new feature that we see on the Hadean board. You can choose what color you want the lights to be, what patterns you want them to flash in, if you want them off or on. It's not something that I particularly really wanted on a board, but it's a nice touch, especially because when you brake, the rear end of the board lights up in red to show everyone behind you that you're braking. So at nighttime, that would be a really nice feature. As a quick side note as well, some of the things that have been built into the remote, the calibration that you had to do to the buttons, if you dropped the remote or if you hadn't ridden the board for a while, or whatever reason you might need to recalibrate them, all of this is now done automatically. So it's just a better, more premium remote, something that you would have probably expected to see on the GTR, especially because of how much those boards retailed when they first dropped. Now, the last two bits that I wanted to touch on is the bushings. You guys always know that on my GTR Bamboo, I ripped out the default bushings and put in the advanced bushings, or the extra bushings that you can get on the Evolve website. Now, the original ones were just too squishy for me, and these ones, although they look exactly the same, the ones that are featured on the Hadean board, they feel better. I've not really felt the need to switch them out just yet. I've not put that many miles on the board so far, so maybe after I've been riding it for a few more months, this might change. I have copped a set of the bushings that I'm going to replace them with if this does happen, but I just wanted to mention that I don't know if it's something Evolve have changed, because, you know, I can't exactly call them and ask them, but it's something that I can feel the difference of. I feel like they're a better compound, a little bit stiffer, which goes a long way with me. I might be wrong, but it's just something that I've noticed while I've been riding the board, so I thought I'd mention that. Another point that I wanted to cover about the design of the board is when we look at the buttons and the different ports that are on the board, like the USB ports and the charging ports, the previous GTR Bamboo, the little rubber flaps that they put in front of them would fall off, they wouldn't go back on properly, they'd pop off while you were riding them, they sucked. The Hadean board has much better ones. They're much stiffer, they fit in much deeper, they're easier to take in and take out, they look better as well, and they just don't pop out. They're not as flimsy, they don't feel as cheap, so that's a nice upgrade that's been added. And in addition to this, the actual charging port is now not one directional, because if you remember on the older boards, you had to like line up the charger so it would go into the port. Now you can put it in pretty much any way and it goes in. It's something really simple, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but I like it. Now, of course, these are all the things that are great, that are the differences between the GTR Bamboo and the Hadean board. All of the things that they've done that are nice, that we appreciate, that are different. Now, what about the things that I don't like? The first one is going to be the fact that the board doesn't hit 30 miles an hour. I did explain that I understand why, but for the price you're paying, the type of board that it is, the setup that it has, I would want the board to be able to hit 30. I would want the option to be able to turn the limiter off. If this is something that could be done with Evolve, I would love to be able to do that, because that's what I want the board to be able to do. I did mention that, of course, double kingpin trucks, a lot of riders that get these boards might not be so experienced, so you don't want the board doing that kind of miles. But for the riders that are getting these boards that are experienced, I'd like the option. Now, something else that I don't understand why it's not available right now is fast charging. The bigger range, the bigger top speed is great. And I said that I don't really like to ride more than 20 miles in one sitting, but if I'm to go to London for the whole day, we'll be there from sort of 10 a.m. until 11, 12 midnight. Now, if I'm riding for the entire day, I don't want to stop to charge my board after doing 21 miles of riding aggressively and then having to wait about 4.5 hours for the board to charge from 0 to 100. I think in this day and age, in 2022, for a board that costs what it does, not having fast charging is insane. I think that's probably one of the biggest negatives about this board, but I have heard through the grapevine that fast charging is going to be an optional extra that is coming to the Hadean series. I just wish it was available now, because at the end of the day, we're moving into summer. If I'm going to be going out on long rides, taking my board out for the entire day, I want to be able to fast charge. And after riding a DIY board that Ricky built and having a fast charge option where the board goes from completely dead to 100% in like 45 minutes to an hour, I've been spoiled a little bit, and I kind of want that feature back as quickly as possible. But aside from that, that's kind of like the main one or 2 points that I didn't really like. But a couple of nitpicky points that I have as well is the actual shape of the Hadean board deck. When you're holding it, it's a heavier board than the GTR, bigger batteries, the bigger motors, you expect that, bigger deck, wider deck. The board is heavier, but because of the shape of the edges of the Hadean deck, when you're carrying it lengthways in your hands, it's really sharp and it really kind of digs into your hands. It sounds really nitpicky because I could just throw it over my shoulder. But again, I wanted to give the information because I've not really seen any feedback about the shape of the deck while you're holding it online. So I just wanted to let you know about that. The Bamboo GTR deck was much more rounded on the corners, so it was actually quite comfortable to hold lengthways, whereas the Hadean is not. If you've got the original GTR board, a quick side note is knowing that the Hadean has a different shape in terms of the hubs. So the gears that you have for your GTR series aren't going to be able to fit the new wheel design on the Hadean board. So just bear that in mind. Now, when we look at the overall question and the whole purpose of this video, if you are looking at buying a GTR Bamboo or a Hadean and you're trying to figure out if the difference is significant enough to warrant the extra money, or maybe you have a GT or a GTR and you're considering getting the Hadean board, or maybe you're coming across from a completely different manufacturer, I feel like if you're looking at those two boards, the Hadean is the one that you go for without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, even if you're not as an advanced rider. The GTR series had its problems, which you can see lots of videos that we've shot about. You can see what we said in our podcast about that series of boards. And I feel like what the Hadean is the GTR improved, refined, the feedback we gave Evolve from our videos, and also the feedback the electric skateboard community has given Evolve in forums and other videos. It looks like they've taken not all, but a lot of those points on board and created the Hadean series of boards. Hadean. I am a big fan of how this board rides, its performance, its speed, its look, everything compared to the GTR Bamboo. And I'm never going to ride the GTR Bamboo again. That board is now a dinosaur. I'm going to put it up on the wall somewhere and just let it sit there. The Hadean is probably going to be my go-to board for the summer. Now, this probably comes as a surprise after everything that's gone on with ourselves and Evolve, but I'm enjoying the ride of the board. It's as simple as that. Would I like it to hit 30? 100%. But the way it rides, the way it carves, the way it feels, it kind of takes me back to the first time I jumped on the GTR Bamboo a few summers ago, and it brings back all of those emotions and feel. And I feel like that's the most important thing about riding. It's what the board makes you feel, how comfortable you feel with it, and the fact that so far so good, there's been absolutely no issues riding that board. So if you're trying to figure out which one you should go to out of the two, absolutely jump on the Hadean. Don't look at the GTR series, in my opinion. Hopefully I've answered all of the questions that you guys might have had against the older version of these boards versus the new one. If I've missed anything out or you have any questions that you might want to ask, leave them down below in the comments. There's going to be a lot more videos coming, and of course we're going to, at some point when we can get our hands on it, going to be looking at the Hadean carbon board. We'll do a carbon versus bamboo like we did with the GTR series, and also maybe we'll look at the original carbon GTR against the Hadean version. All of these videos are coming, as well as looking at other manufacturers' boards as well. So if you want to see any other videos, make sure you comment down below, let us know what you want to see. It's good to be back, guys. Thank you for the support over this time that we've been absent. And most importantly, we hit 10,000 subscribers while we've been away. I think we're at 10.5 right now. Massive thank you for the support. New videos coming. Ricky's going to be hitting up the DIY section. He'll be doing a bunch of DIY videos that a lot of you guys are going to really love. I'll be looking at the reviews of retail boards, of other manufacturers' boards that you can get that are ready right now. That was a lot. Big mouthful, but thank you guys for watching. Make sure you thumbs up and subscribe, and take care till the next one. Peace.